Because if you do
Yeah.
have fun, you may think it's great. But I can't prove to you that it's great. I can't prove to you that any piece of art is great. I can't prove to you that the Mona Lisa is great. I can't prove to you that certain music is great. That's not how any of this works, and that's kind of why I think art is beautiful.
No, that is how it works. No, that is how it works. No, that is how it works.
Objectivity is going down the same exact rabbit hole as the word literally. Literally means in a literal sense or manner. Exactly. If you tell me that you were blown away, I'll assume that you are emphasizing your surprise or amazement at something. The phrase, "I am blown away," is an idiom. Definitionally, an idiom cannot be literal, as it is a phrase that has a figurative meaning. It is non-literal. Now, if you were to tell me that you were literally blown away, this would be an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in terms, because you're stating an idiom as literal. You are using the word wrong. However, you could have knowledge of this and still say you were literally blown away for the mere reason of emphasizing the fact that you were surprised, maybe for comedic effect. You're putting an emphasis on another emphasis because this is how we talk. It's culturally accepted now, even though it's objectively wrong. But speaking of objectively, what do I mean when I say objectivity is going down the same rabbit hole as literally? Well, over the last couple of years, I have repeatedly heard people say objectively in the same incorrect sense as they would say literally. Going back to the example, saying you're objectively blown away is as incorrect as saying you're literally blown away. It's more common to say literally rather than objectively in this sentence. However, both have the same goal and are obviously trying to emphasize the idiom that you were blown away. And even if the person saying these things is aware of how they're talking incorrectly, they usually don't care. Again, it's oftenly used for comedic effect. The difference, however, is that because of this incorrect usage of the word objectively, people are now losing knowledge of what this word actually means and are using it incorrectly without actually knowing it. It kind of reminds me of texting and abbreviations of overly simple things. Saying LOL in person is almost completely acceptable now. My own friends who have argued with us about have no idea how to use this word. And it's not their fault. It's striking to me that so many people aren't aware of what makes something objective because of the shift that culture has taken in how we emphasize things. The word literally may have a similar issue, but surely not to the same extent, as it's a self-explanatory word. We use it incorrectly all the time for funsies, but objectively does have this issue. It seems nowadays that unless one is super well versed in epistemology, they're using this word wrong consistently. Hey, what do you think about that movie?
I think it was objectively pretty good.
Objectively?
Yeah, objectively.
You know, there's a book I've been meaning to tell you that you should read. Objectivity needs to be understood. It is not a good thing that no one understands this word, and it's also not a good thing that by this misunderstanding, subjectivity's inherent value seems less than it actually is. A stick man your 4-year-old sister drew isn't and doesn't have to be objectively better than the Mona Lisa in order for the Mona Lisa to be more valuable, influential, and iconic. I want to clarify before I keep going, I am not any smarter than you, and you don't have to be smart to know this. I also think a lot of you may already know how to use the word objectively in a sentence, but for those who don't, this video is for you. I hope that this isn't overly complicated, at least in the way I've explained it, and that the topic's simplicity strengthens the message of the video. I'm going to start by defining terms. Objectivity is not only unaffected by feelings, it is unaffected by us as a whole. If something is objective, it is completely independent and outside of us. It is something that we can prove. It has nothing to do with not only how we feel, but with how we think. For example, the fact that 2 plus 2 is 4 is objectively true. It is a fact that is completely independent of our thinking. If I say that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is objectively the coolest math equation, that isn't objective. That is an opinion presented as a fact. It is misleading. It is quite literally an oxymoron. You cannot prove that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is the coolest math equation. You can try and substantiate that claim, but only under your own elected subjective criteria. As the word prove is not a substitute for the word substantiate, they are completely different. Regardless, this is an example of using the word objectively wrong, which I see way too often. At a certain point, it's not that this word is being used wrongly on purpose to emphasize something. It is really being used incorrectly without the user knowing of their error. So for example, some objective statements about gaming would be that Terraria is a 2D video game. Elden Ring is a video game developed by From Software. Twilight Princess was released on the Wii before the GameCube. I can prove that these are true. These aren't opinions, they are objectively true statements. On the other hand, subjectivity is much of the opposite. It has everything to do with what we think. It is dependent on us, not outside of us. A subjective claim can't be proven definitively. For example, the claim Arthur Morgan is a well-written character is a subjective statement. You cannot arrive to that conclusion objectively because there's no standard outside of yourself or people that proves that he is a well-written character. It's an opinion, and your opinions cannot be objective. It may be true to you that he's a well-written character, as it is to me, and for someone else it isn't. The deciding factor on who's objectively right, though, is non-existent. It is not a fact that Arthur Morgan is a well-written character. Furthermore, if I were to try and make a subjective statement and say something like, in my opinion, Twilight Princess was released in 2006, that is just a fact presented as an opinion, but it's not an actual opinion. There's nothing to interpret there. And the statement is just a solidified, provable fact presented incorrectly. It is again misleading. And the same exact sentiment goes if it's an incorrect fact. Now, when it comes to art or video games, the judgments on how good they are still stay completely subjective. This is simply because you can't prove the goodness of art without an objective standard. We can't be an objective standard, so there ends up being no actual objective standard. It is not measurable to a definitive answer. Now you may say, what about everyone agreeing upon art is good? Wouldn't that make it objectively good? For example, a lot of Zelda fans hate Zelda 2. Does this mean the game is objectively bad? No. It is widely subjectively agreed on that it is bad. If it did mean that the game was objectively factually bad, then anything we the majority of people agree upon is objectively true. It's a complete and utter misunderstanding of what the word actually means. You can't assert that your opinion is a fact. It's completely arbitrary. Opinions are literally inherently subjective. If the standard is within people, then it's not outside of ourselves, thus it is subjective. In Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, you start your playthrough by walking into the Land of Shadow. This world is widely considered by the community, and me, to be beautiful. Do you think it is? It's most likely that you said yes. I personally do, and I think a lot of other people will too. This is an overly simplified version of Kant's subjective universality. The same way we can all for the most part agree that mold tastes bad, but we can't prove it. Or, using the same example Kant did, we can all for the most part agree that a flower is beautiful, but we cannot prove it. It's not verifiable. The thing that is verifiable and provable is the amount of people that agree flowers are beautiful. But this does not prove that flowers are objectively beautiful. It proves that it is common for us to feel the beauty of flowers. Likewise, we can use data to see most people did not enjoy Zelda 2 and measure this as an objective fact. We cannot, however, conclude that this then means that Zelda 2 is an objectively bad game. I've seen a lot of people make this a logical connection, but it ultimately fails to realize the fact that agreement and disagreement have no effect upon facts. Another thing, for video games or just art in general, I've heard the argument that you can judge games objectively if you put biases aside, and judge the piece of art on how well it conveyed its intended purpose. While it is true that objectivity requires an absent bias, you can subjectively judge something without letting your bias come through. It's not all of a sudden that if you don't operate on bias that your opinions become objective. Your opinions are still opinions, and opinions are still subjective. Critiques are mere opinion. More specifically and more importantly, criticisms are mere opinion. You are simply judging a game based on a set of criteria you yourself put down, whether it includes bias or not. Someone could judge the game with different criteria, but no matter what, it's all dependent on the critic. It's not objective. Your judgments are not provable to be definitively true. So, why are conversations worth having about games and disagreements about those games if the way you judge them all as art is all subjective? Well, first, there's a widely agreed upon subjective basis that we all operate on and can use to argue and talk about what we love, the way the art interacts with the audience and what emotions it makes them feel. This is the point of a critique, which many seem to completely miss. A critique is not constant criticism, it's an analysis. For games, it's a way of analyzing what you feel and why you feel it. If one of your friends plays a game, they may be able to tell you how much they like it, but not exactly describe why they like it. That's the critic's job. It's a way of interacting with the audience. You can list out your own standards for how you judge something to better highlight your thoughts and feelings. There's also standards a huge majority of us agree on, but when we get more specific, disagreements get more frequent. While this is all subjective, it doesn't lose its value. Video games are designed to please the most amount of people. Just because you can't prove any of it doesn't mean it's not worth talking about. Part of the beauty of art is the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's something that we are in the utmost control of, and that's why it's awesome. I also think it's worth pointing out, however, that when arguing about how good a game is with another person, you should avoid saying that it's all subjective as a scapegoat from substantiating your claims within what basis you are arguing on. You can act objective while criticizing art, which is fine because it's a good way of showing your feelings in a logically tight way. And this is why people will say that they're being objective when criticizing
Let's take a
something,
step back and be objective. What doesn't the game do right? Well, just for reference,
even if their criticisms themselves aren't inherently objective. It is objective within their framework, which is really just an overly complicated way of saying it's subjective, but it conveys the point. It's much different than asserting your opinion is objectively true. It's a thoughtfully crafted depiction of what you think, and it doesn't have to be objectively, provably, definitively, universally true for this to matter. It has value because it's art. It's supposed to be subjective. Next time you use the word objectively, think about what you're actually saying. Is the music in Twilight Princess objectively bad for where it's placed? Is Zelda 2 an objectively bad game? Is Arthur Morgan objectively a well-written character? I don't find it an issue if you're using the word wrong on purpose for humor reasons, but I do, however, think it becomes an issue when it's used incorrectly so often that no one understands how to use it correctly. It's a misunderstanding of how assigning truth value works. Stop asserting your opinions as objective facts. Anyway, I think you get the point. We have a Discord server. Please join. We have a lot of fun there. Okay, bye. Hey, what'd you think about that movie?
Man.
Trying to prove that certain art is good is like trying to prove that the Earth is round. It seems contradictory. Well, first of all, the Earth is round, and second of all,
No.
wait,
No, that's not what he's saying.
I think that's a waste
He's
of
saying
time.
trying to prove that it's good, the way you would prove that the Earth is round is contradictory. He's saying that you cannot prove it the way you can prove the Earth.
Oh, Also, there are
And
measurable
you
things
can-
about art, depending on like what type of art. Like if it's painting, you could talk about composition, or you can talk about the use of color. You could talk about texture. If you're talking about video art, you could talk about shot composition. You could talk about audio design. If you're talking about a sculpture, you could talk about how it's constructed. You could talk about the integrity. You could talk about the choice of materials. You could talk about how it's getting its point across. Like, what is the art saying, and is it saying something valuable? Like, and then in terms of the video game, how does it handle its gameplay integration with the story? Does it have ludonarrative dissonance? How is it organized? Is it fun to play? Does it keep you coming back? Like, there's absolutely ways that you can specifically measure and make value judgments on whether art is good or bad.